Welcome to Wild Side, your wild true crime podcast.
We're your hosts, who are sisters, storytellers, and truth seekers.
I'm Bailey, a therapist who is fascinated by all weird and dark human behaviors.
And I'm Chelsea, an educator here to unearth the facts behind the cases.
We cover true crime because some cases are just too dark to forget,
and others are too wild to ignore.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride. What's up, Wildsiders?
Wildsiders.
Well, we're going to take a break from red collar or any sort of red, and we're going to go into the world of white collar today.
Chelsea's favorite.
I love white collar so much. Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I love it. I love it. And we will also, just as like FYI heads up, we are still working on identifying people to interview. If you guys know anybody or have recommendations, please help us out. It's a lot of what's navigating and collaborating, I guess. Make sure to email us at wildsidepodcast@gmail.com with your recommendations so we can some interviews.
Yeah. And if you guys ever have a great story for us that you want us to cover, send that to our email. We would love to cover maybe a smaller town, nobody really knows about your town or something that happened. We'd love to get some more information and cover it. So shoot us an email.
Please also, if you haven't, rate and review us. We would love you forever because I think we're officially up to 14 cents in ad revenue. And we want to be able to get to a quarter or a dollar. I got you a dollar.
Bet you a dollar, bet you a nickel.
Yeah.
Bet you
so that'd be appreciated.
Shiny quarters. Well, Bailey's going to have lots to say about this because of her background. I have a couple of things to say as well with my background. And without further ado, we're going to start somewhere familiar, a doctor's office. In doctor's offices, it's usually beige walls and a framed anatomy chart that hasn't changed in decades, which is always really weird. Why is it like that? I don't know. And then there's always that soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead, and a patient sits on the exam table, feet dangling slightly above the floor, trying to describe pain in a way that sounds credible but not exaggerated. They're choosing words carefully because experience has taught them that pain is negotiable, that it has to be justified. That patient isn't thinking about national prevalence, curves, or billion-dollar cost models. They're thinking, can I sleep? Can I work? Can I pick up my kid without seeing stars or feeling pain? When the doctor finally writes a prescription, that moment carries weight. It feels decisive, reassuring. And we're taught implicitly that prescriptions are the end result of a careful system. Layers of protection meant to keep people safe. But there are moments when that system can be bent, not by accident, not by ignorance, but by design. And that, my friends, is a scary thought. This is the story of Insys Therapeutics, a pharmaceutical company whose success was built around a powerful opioid called Subsys. It's a white-collar crime story not because it involves money, which it does, a whole lot of money, but because it involves influence. Influence over doctors, influence over insurers, influence over decisions that ordinary people never see.
All right, now to understand why this case matters so much, we really have to understand the drug at the center of it, Subsys. Now, Subsys is a fentanyl-based spray that dissolves under the tongue, so it's like a sublingual spray. The battleground against fentanyl today is massive, but it isn't abstract as most of us unfortunately know. I believe most of us probably have some exposure to opioid overdoses because it is an epidemic in our country. Fentanyl is hardcore. It's a hardcore pain reliever with some crazy potency. Medical sources typically describe it as 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. That means in just a few teeny tiny milligrams or a tiny speck of powder, it can be lethal to an unprotected person. There have literally been police officers that do searches of vehicles that get fentanyl in their system and suffer from an overdose because of it. Fentanyl and its chemical cousins are really driving the majority of fatal overdoses in the US. According to recent forensic and mortality data collected through April of 2025, shows around 76,000 overdose deaths in the US, which is about 210 deaths a day. Fentanyl's footprint is unregulated and has become one of the central public health challenges in the modern opioid crisis. Against the backdrop of potencies and casualties, imagine a drug that delivers this very powerful molecule as a liquid spray under the tongue. And that was Subsys, the product at the center of the Insys Therapeutics scandal. Now, Subsys was initially approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, in early 2012, so before really the height of the fentanyl epidemic that we've been seeing. And it was approved specifically for, quote, breakthrough cancer pain, which is sudden severe flashes of pain that occur when a patient's baseline pain is already being managed. Now, that approval was narrow. It applied only to adults with cancer who were already tolerant to around-the-clock opioid therapy. So you guys can start to see the problem with that, is it is for a very specific population. Opioid tolerance, essentially, just kind of as a side note, means that your body has already adjusted to regular opioid use, right? We all have a tolerance when it comes to substances. And without that tolerance, fentanyl's effects can be really strong. The pharmacology meant Subsys worked very quickly. It got into your bloodstream very quickly, and it's absorbed through the soft tissue under the tongue and into the bloodstream almost immediately. Patients in early clinical studies showed measurable fentanyl levels in their blood within 5 minutes of dosing. So again, it's very quick. This was part of the reason it made sense, in principle, for short, intense episodes of pain, like the breakthrough cancer pain that we were talking about.
Insys Therapeutics, founded and heavily funded by entrepreneur John Kapoor, leaned hard into this one product. Subsys became hugely profitable, and the company's sales and marketing efforts pushed it aggressively into clinical practice. Insys Therapeutics was an American pharmaceutical manufacturing headquarter in Chandler, Arizona, and it was founded in 1990 and incorporated formally in 2002. It's been a while since we've been in the
double O's.
In the double O's. It began as a small specialty drug company that over 2 decades would become synonymous with one of the most controversial episodes in modern medicine. In a typical year of operating at its peak, Subsys generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for the company. The company's executive leadership included billionaire founder John Nath Kapoor, who established Insys' strategy and played a deeply influential role in its direction. Kapoor, an Indian-American pharmaceutical entrepreneur, acted as chairman and held significant equity in the business. By the mid-2010s, Insys was growing from a regional specialty drug maker into a publicly traded company with hundreds of employees and global investment interest. For several years in the mid-2010s, Subsys was by far the major revenue driver for Insys Therapeutics. And I'm sure you all are wondering, how much were they making? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Comprehensive financial results showed that for the full year in 2015, Insys' total net revenue was $330.8 million from one drug. Bailey, that's a lot of dojo.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of dough.
Can I also say that I had to Google how many Americans on average a year have cancer, and it says roughly 2 million. And I'm having a really hard time understanding how 2 million, and that's all cancer patients, not just the ones with that probably qualify according to FDA outlines for this drug.
Correct.
How that adds up to 330 million, like a third of $1 billion. That's wild to me.
Well, it is. And I think that's exactly the point is, yes, cancer, is rampant and it's ugly and it doesn't discriminate, but there are not very many people that qualify for this very narrow qualification of this, because that is cancer. That's, stage 1, that is cancer in remission. Like, these are lots of different cancers that add to this total that you were looking at, Bailey. And that was my question. Where are they finding these people, right? And that is where Bailey is going to step in and tell us, oh, believe me, when there's a will, there's a way.
As just like an anecdotal piece before I get into my part, I worked in a pharmacy for years, kind of as my first big girl job when I was working my way through college. And we had to deal with pharmaceutical reps a lot. And of course, I didn't understand, pharmaceutical reps and that side of things. But just to get you to understand what we're talking about here is obviously Insys Therapeutics, the big company now making millions and millions of dollars off this drug. They are not the ones writing the prescriptions. No. They are identifying doctors and nurse practitioners that would write the prescriptions. And a lot of times you have, what are they called, Chelsea? I was just talking about them. Pharmaceutical sales reps and stuff like that. Will go out and they're like sales of like, hey, we have this new drug. They would go in the pharmacies, they go to doctors' offices, they go, to different places. And so what Insys did in their kind of internal marketing style is they focused on who already had access to a large number of pain patients. Now, this would make sense if you're looking at it from a pure business marketing standpoint. Hey, we want to sell lots of this drug because we want to make a lot of money. We all know that big pharma likes to make money. And so they find entities that already have lots of pain patients, especially, now here's the kicker, non-cancer pain patients, like, back pain, neck pain, other kind of long-term conditions. Because these providers already had waiting rooms full of patients looking for relief. So Insys didn't need to create new patients. The patients were already there. They were already, in the proverbial lines. Is that how you say it? I don't know.
Sure.
And so the company then encouraged these providers to prescribe Subsys, even though Subsys was approved only for breakthrough cancer pain. And you guys are probably thinking, you can't do that. Well, welcome to Wild Side, and it's a true crime podcast. You absolutely cannot do that. But we all know that, or as the saying goes, everybody kind of has a price, and that's where we're starting to see it here.
Well, and apparently that price was worth, what was it, $330 million.
Yeah. What we will come to find out is that Insys paid these providers through what they called, quote, speaker programs, which were supposed to be educational in nature, but were allegedly used as financial rewards tied to how much Subsys a provider prescribed. So it's like your typical kickback program. Hey, we're going to give you 10 red marbles. If you sell all 10 of your red marbles, then we'll give you, $50 or $500. And it incentivizes doctors to prescribe. And, this is where it gets really sticky because, yes, doctors have the oath of all the stuff, but I have seen firsthand how reports from a patient, charts from a patient, history from a patient can be interpreted differently by 3 different doctors. And 3 different doctors may have 3 different diagnoses and prescribe 3 different medications, right? So I think it's a natural thing that we have as humans, and this really played into that. So if a provider wrote more Subsys, they were invited to more speaking events and got paid more money. If they wrote fewer prescriptions, the invitation stopped. And so this explains how this drug ended up being prescribed to people without cancer. It flowed through doctors who already treated large numbers of non-cancer patients already. And Big Pharma found a way to get its hooks in.
Well, and Bailey, I think what's so interesting is not only are they incentivizing financially, but how many people do we know, if given an opportunity to have a spotlight, would absolutely take it? So the more that they prescribed, they were then invited to speak at events, right? So they were almost being elevated in their status or prestige. So I just think that is kind of, a really dark version of brilliance on not only are we going to give you financial benefits because of it, but we're also going to give that ego boost. And that's really a scary combination.
I mean, it's fucked up, unethical, and illegal, but still brilliant.
Yes. So, yes, I'm going to say scary. I'm going to do the Polly Pocket version, and I'm going to say it's real scary. It's super scary.
Yeah.
Now, my favorite thing to say is when you fly that close to the sun with glued on wings, what is going to happen is you are going to come tumbling down. So Insys Therapeutics, it came under investigation after a complex web of legal complaints, whistleblower actions, and federal law enforcement scrutiny. The first public legal ripples began not with a federal raid, but with qui tam lawsuits filed under the False Claims Act, civil actions brought by whistleblowers alleging that Insys paid kickbacks to doctors to prescribe Subsys for patients who did not meet the FDA's narrow approval criteria. And that, my friend, is the other half of this shocking case. So not only do we have people pushing these medications and they're getting kickbacks, but then we have the insurance deception.
I think we all feel some type of way about health insurance, right? Health insurance companies, Big Pharma, we're probably touching a lot of hot buttons here.
I was going to say, Bailey and I both are kind of like gritting our teeth because we're like, don't speak into it. Don't speak into it. Don't lean. Just stay right there in the middle. Right there.
Yeah, for sure. So the writing of the prescriptions, right, the actual physical writing of the prescriptions was just the first step. Getting paid for it was the second. And that step was arguably a little bit more fragile because Subsys was no doubt expensive. It could cost thousands of dollars a month per patient, especially at the higher doses, which obviously a lot of them probably used. And because the drug was approved for such a super narrow use, insurance companies didn't automatically say yes. They required prior authorization. So my small little tangent for this is, while I understand the massive headache of insurance denials, it is really supposed to be a fail-safe in a lot of cases, right? When I worked at a pharmacy, the pharmacists were a fail-safe in a lot of cases because people would doctor shop, or it could be genuinely an error where doctors send in medications that you could not mix, and the pharmacist would say, "Hey, this patient cannot have both." They'd call the doctor, yada yada yada. So you have to understand that prior authorizations, while they suck in a lot of ways, and they usually do deny a lot of stuff, it is used in this case when a drug is powerful, costly, or risky. And it forces everybody to take a pause, right? A moment where someone who is not emotionally pulled by the patient's story or medical history or the doctor's, pearly whites or whatever, somebody outside of the exam room checking that the prescription actually fits the medical rules that the Federal Drug Administration made. And there's a lot of this going on, right? Like Xanax is wild. If you guys actually looked up Xanax, it's supposed to only be taken, I think, for 2 months max. And after that, it literally increases your anxiety 250%. But a lot of doctors get paid a lot of money for Xanax, and or they are just not educated in addiction science. So the pause is meant to confirm two things. Number one, that the patient actually did have cancer. duh. Number two, that they were already opioid tolerant, so they would need to prove that. It wasn't about slowing the care, it was making sure that the drug matched the situation. Again, it's a protective mechanism to protect not only the patients, but the clinicians and the system itself. But Insys saw that pause just as a hiccup, something to figure out a way to get over. Inside the company, Insys created an operation literally called Insys Reimbursement Center. This is the biggest walking red flag ever. On paper, sounded harmless. Patient support, navigating insurance paperwork. We're assisting with a really complicated process. But what was actually happening is it really kind of turned into a centralized effort designed to push approvals, even when the prescriptions didn't meet the rules. So once again, fucked up, illegal, unethical. Employees in this unit were trained to call insurance companies on behalf of doctors. But the critical detail here is they often didn't say that they worked for Insys. They weren't like, hey, right, so I'm an employee of the company that makes this drug, because people doing the prior authorization would be like, hold up. They presented themselves as staff from the doctor's office. Wild. Because insurers, again, typically trust a voice on the other end of the line. And those calls, of course, were not improvised. There were internal training materials showing what scripts for staff to follow. They were taught which diagnoses triggered approval and how to respond to pushback from insurance companies. The cancer pain was not emphasized. Opioid tolerance was affirmed, and the language wasn't chosen to reflect the medical reality of these patients. It was chosen to fit the insurance checklist. This wasn't occasional. This became a routine thing at Insys. And of course, super deceptive because it was so invisible, kind of like, a daycare that doesn't have kids in it. Weird.
We're staying in the middle, Bailey. We're staying in the middle.
In the middle. So patients never heard the calls. Doctors never saw the details. Insurers processed requests assuming the person calling was exactly who they claimed to be. Right. I mean, there's a level of trust when it comes to that. From the insurer's point of view, everything looked normal, right? A request came in, the criteria was met, at least on paper, and the payment went out. But this is what would eventually actually create a lot of alarm for prosecutors down the line. They would argue that when a company quietly inserts itself into the prior authorization process, it doesn't just influence one decision, it undermines the safeguard itself. I mean, correct. We're talking about how this literally undermines that safeguard that is prior authorizations. The pod stops working, oversight becomes easier to kind of cut corners and bypass, and it starts to create a lot of problems. This insurance deception matters because it completed the full circle. Doctors were, again, encouraged, incentivized to prescribe. Insurance approvals were pushed through. Revenue came back. And at the center of it all was the patient, somebody, most of the time, in real pain, trusting a system that they never saw and never agreed to participate in. This manipulation, rather than, someone gunning down a CEO healthcare in the street, it wasn't obvious. It's exactly what makes this kind of crime, maybe, I don't even want to say boring, Chelsea, but I mean, it's not fun and exciting and interesting, and people aren't talking about it all over media. There's not memes about it. There's not, books that you can put money on in a prison. It's quiet and it's really hard to detect, but it is so damaging once it finally comes into focus.
By the time the federal government stepped in, Insys wasn't flying under the radar anymore. Years before anyone was arrested, state regulators were already raising concerns. In August 2015, the Oregon Department of Justice reached a $1.1 million settlement with Insys over allegations that the company had promoted Subsys beyond its FDA approval for breakthrough cancer pain. Other states, including New Hampshire, followed with similar actions. These cases weren't criminal, but they were early warning signs. Regulators were watching how Subsys was being marketed and prescribed, which I just have to take a moment and say, I am always in awe. And I'm always like, my hope is restored a little bit when I hear that it's like, hey, there are people who are hearing things and seeing things and care enough to say, I don't think this is the math is not mathing. At the same time, something else was happening quietly in the background. Watchdog groups and journalists began noticing prescribing patterns that, what did we just say? Math wasn't mathing, and it didn't add up. Subsys was approved again, and I know we keep saying this, but guys, so many of these medications, like Bailey was talking about Xanax, it needs to be taken appropriately. It is for a very small, specific group of patients. Yet, pharmacy data showed it being prescribed far more often and to a much broader population than expected. As fentanyl began driving overdose deaths nationwide, those numbers stood out even more. Then came the whistleblowers. In April 2018, the United States formally intervened in 5 lawsuits filed under the False Claim Act. These cases alleged that Insys paid doctors. I mean, it's kind of one and the same, isn't it, Bailey?
Freudian slip.
They paid doctors and nurse practitioners to prescribe Subsys through improper means, sham speaking fees, luxury meals, and benefits tied directly to prescribing volume. When the Department of Justice stepped into cases like this, it's a clear signal. Prosecutors believe the evidence points to something more serious than routine marketing disputes. But by then, the investigation had already crossed into criminal territory. Between 2016 and 2017, federal agencies were building a broader case. In October 2017, Insys founder John Kapoor and several senior executives were arrested and charged. The allegations were stark. Prosecutors said they conspired to bribe medical providers to prescribe Subsys and to deceive insurance companies by misrepresenting patient diagnoses, ensuring the drug would be paid for even when it didn't meet approval criteria. This wasn't a single agency review either. According to the Department of Justice, the investigation involved listen to this list, Bailey, the FBI, the DEA, the FDA criminal investigators, Health and Human Services inspectors, and multiple U.S. attorney offices. It had moved well beyond civil oversight and into a full-blown criminal enforcement.
Yeah, it was a BFD. It was a big fucking deal, as Skip would say.
It was.
Yeah. Now, that all happened very quickly. We talked a lot about, like the prep leading up, Insys and Sysys or whatever. What's the drug called?
Subsys.
Subsys, right. Sublingual Subsys. All right. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, people are catching on. Oh, and things pop off. It definitely took years and years, but in this case, right, in our episode, it's going by pretty quickly. And now we're getting to, the consequences, the ramifications, essentially the trial. By the time that Insys case reached a federal courtroom, it was in Boston in 2019, and it was no longer about a single drug or a handful of questionable prescriptions. It was much more massive than that. It was about whether a whole-ass pharmaceutical company had turned medical decision-making into quite literally a business strategy that was all coordinated in and amongst itself, and it was built on deception. I think we can all agree that that would be the case. Prosecutors during the trial were not claiming that fentanyl itself was illegal, and they were not arguing that doctors don't exercise judgment. But what they instead were laying out was this. Insys executives literally designed a system to influence who got a powerful opioid and how often it was prescribed. I mean, there should never be that kind of reach, obviously. By the time that this case reached trial, the government was not asking jurors to imagine what might have happened. They were shown. According to court records and the trial reporting, the prosecution built its case entirely on insider testimony and documents. Former Insys executives and employees, so people who had worked for and inside the company, took the stand and described play-by-play how this operation functioned. Several of them had already pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate, as they should, including the company's former CEO and head of sales. Jurors were shown emails and spreadsheets and payment records that tracked prescribing behavior in very careful detail. Patterns were pointed out, right? Patterns that prosecutors said was impossible to ignore. When a doctor prescribed more Subsys, payments to that doctor increased, right? I mean, you can argue causation does not equal correlation, but I think that's what prosecutors do when, they don't have direct evidence. When prescriptions slowed, the money stopped. Imagine that. Speaker fees rose and fell in direct relation to prescription volume, which is, this whole thing pisses me off, you guys. And it pisses me off for many reasons. Many reasons this case pisses me off.
In one corner, we have lightweight Bailey coming in hot with a 1-2 punch. Coming hot.
So I'm an addiction therapist, right? My career, most of it has been working with drug and alcohol abuse. I have lost count, unfortunately, of the clients that I have lost to drug overdoses. A lot of them were benzodiazepines like Xanax and opioids or suicide. So anytime I read stuff like this, I have people's faces, over the last more than a decade of my career, just client faces that always pop in my head. And it just makes it feel so personal, right? And so it pisses me off. Anyways, I digress. Okay. So during the trial, the government emphasized that this wasn't obviously just a handful, it was just a few bad calls or one rogue employee. The evidence showed consistently over time the same tactics repeated again and again. This focus on long-term patterns was critical. It allowed prosecutors to really show that there wasn't accidents or misunderstandings, but there was a design system. And that distinction really mattered because it led directly to the charge that defined this case.
The prosecution charged Insys executives under RICO, and I asked Bailey when we were prepping for this case, I was like, yeah, and RICO is involved. I was like, do you know what that means? And she's like, no, I don't know what RICO means. So this...
I had heard RICO in other criminal cases. I've heard the use of RICO.
Well,
but
yeah.
I didn't know specifically what it was. I'm pretty sure it was also in Bad Boys, the movie.
It might have been.
I think RICO was involved.
For those of you on Side Chelsea that did not know, because I was today years old, it is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. RICO. It was, fun fact, here we go, because you guys know that I love finding out the fun facts of this stuff. It was written in the 1970s to dismantle organized crime. So the prosecution charged Insys executives under that RICO Act. So it's the statute prosecutors use when wrongdoing isn't accidental or isolated, but organized, ongoing, and structural, just like organized crime, just like the mob or the mafia.
I was like, literally, they were treating this case the same way they would.
Yes. That is wild, guys.
As they should.
Yes, right? It allows the government to show that a group of people functioned as what they would say a quote-unquote enterprise, using repeated illegal acts like bribery and fraud to achieve a common goal. So by invoking RICO, prosecutors were saying something extraordinary. They were essentially saying that Insys didn't just cross ethical lines, it operated like an organized criminal enterprise, even though it wore the language of medicine and compliance. To convict under RICO, prosecutors had to prove that the defendants knowingly participated in an enterprise that committed repeated illegal acts to achieve a shared goal. According to post-trial DOJ statements, That's exactly what these prosecutors were able to do. And the jury agreed that this standard was met. And they could go forth essentially treating this like a mafia ring.
Yeah, the jurors probably were... I think everybody hates Big Pharma. I think it's a collective hate. And I think a lot of people hate insurance companies. Even the people who work for them kind of hate insurance companies. And these jurors were probably like, not around here, partner.
Not around here. So on May 2nd, 2019, a federal jury in Boston convicted John Kapoor, Insys founder, along with 4 other senior execs of racketeering conspiracy. Jurors rejected the defense argument that this was simply aggressive but lawful marketing. Again, hashtag not around here. They concluded that payments labeled as speaker fees were in reality bribes tied to prescribing behavior.
I mean, you fucking think so?
I know.
Stuff makes me so mad. Okay, go ahead, Chelsea.
I think this is why we don't do a lot of white crime, because I think it really pushes buttons that Bailey forgets that she has. I really do.
Well, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but victims, and so many victims on such a massive scale.
I was going to say the ripple effect.
And how many of these people that did not have pre-existing treatments that the FDA required, which was being opioid tolerant, that's a very important factor. How many overdoses probably happened because of this, or how many new addicts were created because of this? Because a lot of addicts, this is what you guys don't understand. I can't tell you how many. I would have to look up the statistics. I don't know it off the top of my head. More and more and more and more and more addicts start because their doctor prescribed them medications. Their dentist, their doctor, a MD, a DO, a DDS, whatever, prescribe them a medication because they're negligent, maybe naive, maybe uneducated, whatever the case is, and these people take it and they're hooked. They're hooked. And so a lot of people, I think, don't have sympathy for addicts, quote unquote, because they're like, well, that's what you get for, smoking the devil's lettuce, or that's what you get for making bad choices. And it's like, what is your argument for the person who walked out of a doctor's office and they said, here, you need to take this, it will help you.
Yeah, and you need to take it every 4 to 6 hours. You know what I mean? This doesn't happen in grimy back alleys.
No.
This happens literally
in shiny doctor's offices.
In examination rooms that have really cute, feng shui waiting areas.
Yeah, and I worked in rehabs for most of my career, inpatient rehabs, and we would have medical doctors who were addictionologists. And I remember I worked with a brilliant addictionologist. His name was Dr. Ravi. And I would just talk to him about why are all these people coming in here hooked on opioids from their doctors? And I remember him telling me, Bailey, you have to understand, the average medical doctor has a class on substance and addictionology. He was so maybe 2 hours in their entire 4 to 12 year doctorate degree. He was like, it is insultingly disgusting how little the average doctor has being trained in addiction. Addictionologists, it's a whole different, you have to learn everything in and out. And that's why, anytime I did private practice and I would work with clients that had an addiction issue, I would always try to set them up with an addictionologist, not just a primary care physician.
Yeah. I don't know if we've talked about it, but for some of you guys know, my husband's a pharmacist. And so we've talked heavily about these situations where he's like, I get prescriptions that come into the pharmacy and I'm like, dude, no, absolutely not at either this dosage, not at this strength.
Yeah, it'll kill you.
Yeah. This, why are we doing this? Right. So, and I get it. There are checks and balances and
pharmacists, the next time you guys see a pharmacist, you need to pat them on the back and say thank you. Because pharmacists get it from all sides, because pharmacists are the ones who have to call the doctors and basically say, what the hell are you doing prescribing this person this? And they're like, I'm the doctor, you don't question me. And they're having to argue with the patients. They're having to argue with the doctors. They're having to argue. I mean, it's just insane.
Speaking of insane, back to the outcome, right? The verdict. And why this is so wild is when the legal analysts, they noted that this was one of the first successful uses of RICO against a senior pharmaceutical executive. And that alone made this verdict historic. So to put this kind of in perspective, most healthcare misconduct is handled as a civil issue, not a criminal one, because the legal system is designed to treat improper billing and regulatory violations as problem of money, not as in the category of intent. Under the False Claims Act, the government only has to show that false or misleading claims were submitted to insurers, especially Medicare or Medicaid, not that anyone meant to commit a crime. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's in itself kind of wild. And that's why most cases end in settlements and fines, and they fly under the radar, pretty much settled with a handshake, often without admissions of guilt. Criminal cases require far more. Prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that people knowingly and deliberately worked together to break the law. And in healthcare, where actions can be defended as medical judgment, or possibly a business strategy or regulatory complexity, that level of proof is extremely rare. The Insys case, it crossed that line. It crossed over from being civil to being criminal. And prosecutors didn't argue that Insys merely billed improperly or pushed the edges of the marketing rules. They argued that the company built a coordinated system to influence prescribing and deceive insurers, tracking doctors, paying them based on prescription volume, and manipulating insurance approvals behind the scenes. That moved the case out of the civil world of fines and into the criminal world of conspiracy and racketeering. By charging Insys the executives under criminal statuses instead of relying only on the False Claims Act, the government sent a clear message. This wasn't just about money being lost. It was about trust being abused. In the Insys case, influence over medication and over the medicine in general wasn't treated as a regulatory misstep, but as a crime that reshaped medical decisions themselves. But the consequences went even further.
The good thing about this is it will make other pharmaceutical entities think twice. Because up until this point, right, if you think about it, they made $330 million in one singular year. These companies have malpractice insurance, they have all this stuff. And so, yeah, that's fine, we'll pay these people off. Criminal charges? Criminal charges means you go into prison, playa. You go into prison. And that's exactly where John Kapoor went. He was sentenced to 66 months in federal prison. Should be more if you ask me, but whatevs, what do I know? And the other executives received prison sentences as well. Shortly after the verdict, Insys Therapeutics reached a global resolution with the DOJ totaling, y'all ready for this? $225 million. That's it. $225. The company's operating subsidiary pleaded guilty to multiple counts of mail fraud, settled civil claims under the False Claims Act, and Insys soon filed for bankruptcy and shut down. Good. I'm not usually pro companies going under, like, you know what I mean? I love the American dream. I want people to succeed.
I know.
But y'all's raunchy stank ass needs to go.
Yeah.
Experts and post-verdict reporting largely agree on why this case stands apart from others. It didn't criminalize the medicine. It criminalized the deliberate manipulation of the medical decision-making. It established that executives, not just the corporations any longer, but the people behind them, could be held personally responsible when systems are built to replace judgment with incentives. The verdict, unfortunately, did not end our opioid crisis, but it did do this. It drew a hard line in the sand and showed that under the right evidence, influence over medicine can be treated not as a regulatory violation, but as a cold, hard crime. And that's why this trial is still being cited to this day, because it changed what accountability looks like. The verdict is so important because it established a precedent, like we were saying. The jury agreed with prosecutors that what happened at Insys was not accidental or an oopsie or, a one person. It was a collective criminal system. And finally, the law recognized it as one.
The Insys case, I think what it did is it changes the legal and cultural terrain in a way that still matters. And after the convictions and the company's collapse, Insys ceased to exist as an operating pharmaceutical company. And that's a big deal. Its assets were sold off in bankruptcy. Its name became a cautionary case study, and its leadership faced prison sentences rather than quiet resignment. And guys, sometimes that matters. And in this case, I really think that matters. They didn't just get to sail off on their yacht in the sunset somewhere with, maybe $1 million or $2 million less than they had before. They didn't get to quietly resign. They went to jail. They had to plead guilty. The outcome alone really was unusual. In healthcare enforcement, accountability almost always stops at corporate fines, and Insys pushed it further. In the aftermath, prosecutors became more willing, though still cautious, to pursue individual executives, not just companies. The case demonstrated that when influence is systematic, I guess it could be both, documented and tied directly to medical decisions, criminal charges are possible. That precedent didn't open floodgates, unfortunately, but it did crack a door that had been long closed. There were also regulatory and industry level changes, though they arrived unevenly. Speaker programs across the pharmaceutical industry came under heightened scrutiny, which they should. Several companies reduced or eliminated them entirely, and professional medical organizations issued stricter guidance on conflicts of interest. Yes. Transparency requirements expanded, making payments to clinicians more visible through public databases. The message was subtle, but it was clear. Influence was no longer to be treated as harmless background noise. On the insurance side, prior authorization systems became even more rigid. And you know what, Bailey? I think that's another thing that really gets us all wound up is the fact that people who were doing it the right way and who were already being kind of aggravated by prior auth, now it's an even more rigid system because of people who can't play nice. And insurers responded to fraud not by losing trust, but by tightening control. More paperwork, more denials, more delays. And that, I hate that. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, I don't want another relapse or rehappening of a situation like we saw with Insys. When systems are abused and the safeguards have to multiply, and that burden often shifts to patients who did nothing wrong. It is our everyday person who suffers because of a handful of really greedy folk. In pain management, the consequences are especially sharp. As enforcement increased and fear of liability grew, some clinicians became more reluctant to prescribe opioids at all, even when medically appropriate. Research following the opioid crackdown has shown, really mixed outcomes. There is a reduction in prescribing, yes, but also reports of patients with legitimate pain being undertreated or abruptly cut off. The system corrected in one direction, but then overcorrected in another. And again, fentanyl itself, it didn't disappear, and illicit fentanyl continues to dominate overdose death, reinforcing a hard truth that the Insys case made it's impossible to ignore. Corporate misconduct and street-level harm are connected, but not interchangeable. Punishing one doesn't automatically solve the other.
So what does this case leave behind? It leaves really responsibility, I think. It leaves us clear as to where there is a line in the sand. Insys did that. Selling a drug is not the same thing as steering medical decisions. Teaching doctors is not the same as paying them to prescribe. Again, when these types of lines are crossed, The consequences are no longer just financial, they can be criminal, as it was in this case. It acknowledges that patients have always assumed this to be true anyways, but that medicine should be guided by evidence and care, not pressure and profit. When that trust is broken, and I mean trust not even just with the patient, but I mean with like the Department of Justice not trusting Big Pharma, like trust in a million different directions, you have to have accountability. It's necessary, right? Because without it, the system quietly teaches itself that harm is acceptable as long as it pays. And that, our dear listeners, is the stupid, shitty story or case of the Insys Therapeutics. I mean, it's a great case to cover, right? It brings awareness, which I'm a huge fan of. It just makes me so mad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so Bailey and Bailey does a lot of the research. She, everybody on our platform, if you've been here for a while, you know that I, finished up a master's and I'm always working on something. And so Bailey does a bunch of the heavy lifting. And Bailey had called me last week and she was like, hey, will you please start the research on this? Like, will you please look into this? She's like, I need it to be white crime or white collar, I mean. And I was like, yeah, I got you. And I called her today, kind of as we'd been looking over this case. And I was just like, have you been thinking about how wild this case is? And the fact that I really have not heard of this. I haven't seen a lot of documentaries on it. You know what I mean? Like, there really has not been anything. And
because the media is the devil. It's the devil, Bobby.
Yeah.
It's the devil.
Well, and
the media has not designated this as important.
Well, and what's upsetting, I think, to me is the timeline for this case, because I called Bailey right when I first started researching this case. And I was like, if I say fentanyl, what year? Like, when do you really start thinking of, like, the war on fentanyl? And Bailey was like, I don't know. I think you ended up saying, like, I don't know, 2018 or 2020.
Yeah, like 2017, 2018, at least just on the spot from my memory.
Right. And that's when I started seeing it, like putting posters up and down the high school hallways and things like that. But the fact that this was an FDA approved drug back in 2012, and it makes you wonder, was this a launching pad?
So it's funny that you say this, Chelsea, because I just looked it up, right? And now, you guys, this is not like a deep dive. This is literally, I typed it in Google and the AI overview, what it popped up is 2013. So obviously it started like early 2000s, but I think it really picked up in what they call the third wave was 2013. And I am wondering if this stupid corporation, I mean, they absolutely had to have contributed to this too.
It's hard for me to not see a connection, and that right there. So Bailey thinking of patients that she worked with, clients that she worked with, in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, like those years, how many of them were in your practice because of something like this? And that's heartbreaking to me.
A lot of them. And that is, and I don't want to go on a self-righteous rant about addiction, but what you think you know about addicts, you're probably incorrect. Let's just kind of put it that. Like, there's a lady I'll never forget, and I have a ton of these stories in 50 different directions, but she came into a rehab that I worked at, and she was middle-aged. I don't remember roundabouts what, middle-aged, and had a gnarly alcohol problem. And one of the things that we do when you first come in is we do a full biopsychosocial, right? So we get all of the dimensions of your life, literally from birth until current day. And I'm very thorough with it. I want to know everything, relationships, co-occurring issues, everything. And this lady literally was like, I did not drink until 5 years ago. Like, sure, I had a beer here and there over the course of my life. And I was like, what happened? She had weight loss surgery. She had a bypass.
Oh.
And arguably, arguably there wasn't the doctor over, and I'm not blaming anybody per se. I'm having you guys look at the complexity and the nuance of addiction and what happens. Arguably, her doctor who performed the surgery wasn't like, you can become an alcoholic real fast with this. Like, your relationship with alcohol will change literally overnight. The minute you have the surgery, and we cut out parts of your stomach or, rearrange. And so this woman went from never being drunk a single time in her life to having a weight loss surgery and being a full-blown alcoholic in early stage liver failure in 5 years. So all of this like, woo, addicts, bad decisions. Like, you guys just you're so probably wrong. And I say that because everybody knows an addict, surely, if not once removed or twice removed. And my heart just goes out. And that's why this case pisses me off so much, is because addicts have a hard enough time. People have a hard enough time. And they don't need life to be more difficult by going to a doctor's office and walking out with a full-blown opioid addiction in the span of 6 months.
It also hurts me for the people who I really truly cannot imagine what the pain must be like in this very, very small group of people. And so it hurts me to think that, this group, this breakthrough cancer pain group, are probably now having there's so much red tape around what they can get and what can manage their pain now, because of things like this, because of vanity, because of greed, because of, I don't know, luxuries in life. And it's just sad. So what do we get out of it? We get more addicts, right? We get new addicts, and we get
more loopholes, more denials, more money having to be paid.
But then the people who really were like, finally some relief, like moments of happiness in my life, that's probably now taken away because of the scrutiny and everything else. So I don't know. I'm glad we learned about this. Even though it makes us upset, I love knowing what's out there, and I love that I feel like it makes us better.
Yeah. And on that note, you guys, we got to log off, or we'll go on for the next 45 minutes. One thing before we close, if you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, keep going. There are people out there who love you and will do anything to help you. There's really gifted doctors and clinicians who can help you through your journey. So I'm sending lots of prayers and positive waves of karma, whichever you prefer, out your way. And that's what I wanted to say. So as always, thanks for hanging out with us through this wild and crazy ride.
And we'll catch you on the wild side.
Bye, guys.
Later, Gators.